Living in the city now, living in my memory. Glance the lights of the city. You were there, with your friend, with your family, with your life.
October 1964. Man, that was a banner year for Tokyo. It seemed like the entire world came to town for a visit, and the Japanese were going all out to throw a huge party called the Olympics. But that came with a price, something near and dear to our hearts: Washington Heights. Wash Heights, as we called it, was, and I underscore was, for nearly 2 decades a virtual American town right smack dab in the heart of the world's largest city. You see, the American gaijins were replaced by gaijins from everywhere else on the planet. Some 7,500 athletes competing in the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. So the U.S. Air Force agreed to give up Wash Heights so they'd have a place to stay for 2 whole weeks.
World's biggest city, more than 10 million population and still growing, Tokyo prepares for the first Olympic Games to be held in the Orient. The headquarters of Japan's Olympic Committee is humming these days. A massive facelifting is but one part of the feverish activity in the Japanese capital. The remarkable recovery the Japanese have made since World War II is a matter of record. And now they tackle the Olympic Games set for October '64, determined that it give further indication of a revitalized nation. The Tokyo Olympics will be the biggest in history. The enlarged national stadium will welcome 7,500 athletes from 100 nations to compete in 20 sports. This will bring to 4,000 the number of contested events, from elimination heats to finals. 2,000 news media representatives will be on hand to report to the world on the great sports festival.
That's the Daiichi Mutual building in Marunouchi, directly across the street from the Imperial Palace. It's been there since before World War II, and after Japan surrendered, General Douglas MacArthur made the Daiichi his general headquarters, or GHQ as most people knew it. MacArthur was the supreme commander of the Allied powers, or SCAP. Among his first priorities was to house the tens of thousands of occupation troops scattered in and around Tokyo and throughout Japan.
Where's that? Morning, sir.
And soon many of them would be joined by their families from the U.S., wives with children in tow. To that end, from a 6th floor office overlooking the palace, MacArthur ordered the seizure of all Japanese military installations and requisitioned property from private landowners. Among them, the historic Sano and Imperial hotels. Palace Heights was among the first in central Tokyo, but it was little more than a collection of army Quonset huts left over from the war. Mikasa-san, as the Japanese called him, wanted sturdier, more permanent housing for his troops and their dependents. For Washington Heights, he and his staff at GHQ chose the old Yoyogi Imperial Army drill grounds near the Meiji Jingu Shrine. This is where Emperor Hirohito himself used to review his troops. GHQ decided the 228-acre parcel of flat, open land in the center of Tokyo was ideal for a place to build what they envisioned as a virtual American town with Western-style homes and buildings. Now, key to this was a 266-page plan book for occupied Japan and later Korea. It contained detailed blueprints and floor plans and specified everything from household furniture to kitchen appliances.
In 1948, I am 11 years old. I have gone with my mother, sister, and brother to join my father, who has been in Tokyo for 2 years and will be there for several more. We live there in the center of that huge Japanese city in a small American enclave with a very American name, Washington Heights.
Might as well have been America. It had a complex that resembled a strip mall, where the exchange, a snack bar, the theater, the bowling alley, even places I didn't need, like the teen club, were located all together with a big mall-like parking lot in front. And there was no television, unless you wanted to watch sumo wrestling or I Love Lucy in Japanese.
We live in an American-style house with American neighbors.
The houses looked the same on the outside, and they were all the same on the inside, all painted the same too.
And our little community has its own movie theater, which shows American movies, and a small church, a tiny library, and an elementary school. And in many ways, it is an odd replica of a United States village.
We had a round-faced Japanese cleaning lady, as did all the military families at the time.
At 11 years old, I am not a particularly adventurous child, but I've always been curious. Again and again, without my parents' knowledge, I ride my bicycle out the back gate of the fence that surrounds our comfortable, familiar, safe American community because I am curious, and I enter, riding down that hill, area of Tokyo that throbs with life called Shibuya. I remember the babies and toddlers dressed in bright pink and orange and red most of all. But I remember, too, the dark blue uniforms of the school children, the strangers who are my own age.
Jay and I had dark, nearly black hair, but Nancy had sunshine yellow hair, and wherever we went, Japanese children in their school uniforms would follow her, like she was the Pied Piper, reaching their hands out to stroke her unimaginably beautiful hair.
I wander through Shibuya day after day during those years when I'm 11, 12, and 13. I love the feel of it, the vigor and the garish brightness and the noise. All of it's such a contrast to my own life.
And although the building is no longer there, in my mind I can walk through that old school. Our room was second on the right down the main hall, and I sat in the second row midway back and listened to the best teacher I ever had.
From Tokyo, Japan, democracy's bridgehead in the Pacific, where these scouts helped get out the vote for the first free election ever held in that country.
We took lessons in sumi, ink drawing, and ikebana, flower arranging. I had junior choir and Girl Scouts. My brother Jay had the baseball field, and my sister Nancy had her bicycle, and then, when the hula hoop hit Japan, she had that.
The trip back to Akron was clearly on the minds of these boys back in the summer of '61. Besides soapbox derby, There was Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, Little League, Pop Warner, and high school football, swimming and tennis, and of course, most every base had a team club. And for the adults, there was a par 3 golf course and slot machines, cabaret shows, and cheap Johnny Walker Black at the Old Club or the Meiji Club.
810 on your dial, Far East Network, Tokyo.
The time, 11:05.
Hey, Daddy, here comes those teenagers.
Hi, teenagers. Welcome to this morning's Teenagers on Parade. We'll be coming your way for the next 55 minutes with the best in popular music. Anyone that wants to pick our old record for the next week, come on up and give us some suggestions and we might play it. This week we picked one by Ray Charles. What'd I say?
MPC and reconstituted milk were the reminders that despite the movie theater, despite the mall-like parking lot and the football games, this was still Japan.
Hey, mama, don't you treat me wrong. Come and love you, daddy, all night long. All right now. Hey, hey, hey.
By November of 1963, the clock ran out on Washington Heights after nearly 2 decades. Everyone vacated their housing quarters to make room for the Olympic athletes coming the following year. The displaced personnel and dependents were relocated to Kantomura. It was a new housing area on the outskirts of Tokyo near Fuchu, which the government of Japan had built in exchange for Washington Heights. While most of Washington Heights remained intact, at least until after the Olympics, about a third of the housing quarters was leveled to make way for Yoyogi National Gymnasium, a swimming and diving annex, and the new NHK Broadcast Center. Athletes Village, as Wash Heights was now known, had a short shelf life, 2 weeks, as compared to nearly 2 decades under U.S. control.
オリンピック始まって以来、この東京大会のような閉会式がかつてあったでありましょうか。あの秩序正しく華麗であった開会式も素晴らしかった。
Once the games were over, the demolition crews with their bulldozers and wrecking balls went hard at work removing virtually everything the Americans had built in 1947. From these aerial views, it looked as if a typhoon had wreaked havoc on Washington Heights. It took yet another 3 years to redevelop that 228 acres into what is now known as Yoyogi Park. Having said that, not everything was erased. Just inside the Harajuku entrance, look to your right down a long path, and tucked against a dense forest of trees, you'll see a small white stuccoed house with a red tile roof and pale green trim. Housing quarters number 257. Now, Japanese officials kept it not so much as a reminder of when the Americans lived here, but as a memorial to the '64 Olympics. It was where the Dutch team had stayed.
The United States Army has come to know Japan well in recent years, in war, in occupation, and finally in partnership. In the record of that relationship, there can be found the changing symbol of Japan's place in the Far East. Once it was a symbol of destruction. Today, we look upon it as a symbol of stability.